Morning, dear students, I welcome you in my channel. I am Sanju Hazria, Assistant Professor of English at Government College Ratangad. Today we are going to study Wol Soyinka's poem Telephone Conversation, and this poem is included in BA Part 3rd by Maharaja Ganga Singh University, Bikaner. So this is the introductory part, and in this introductory part I will give introduction of the poet and summary of the poem and theme of the poem, and in next section I will explain this poem line to line. So today's session is introductory session. So first of all, introduction of the poet. And you know, Wol Soyinka is the poet of this poem. So this is the introduction of Wol Soyinka. Wol Soyinka was born in Nigeria and educated in England. In 1986, the playwright and political activist became the first African to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. So when Wol Soyinka got the Nobel Prize for Literature? In 1986. He dedicated his Nobel acceptance speech to Nelson Mandela. Soyinka has published hundreds of works, including drama, novels, essays, and poetry, and colleges all over the world seek him out as a visiting professor. So I think you understood this section. And now, next slide. Wol Soyinka was born Ekinwende Oluwole Wole Beptunde Soyinka on July 13, 1934. So what was the full name of Wol Soyinka? His full name was Ekinwende Oluwole Beptunde Soyinka, and he was born on 13th July 1934 in Ebukete near Ibadan in western Nigeria. His father Samuel Ayodele Soyinka was a prominent Anglican minister and headmaster. His mother, Grace Eniola Soyinka, who was called Wild Christian, was a shopkeeper and local activist. As a child, he lived in an Anglican mission compound, learning the Christian teachings of his parents as well as the Yoruba spiritualism and tribal customs of his grandfather. So he also learned Yoruba spiritualism and tribal customs from his grandfather. A precocious and inquisitive child, Wole prompted the adults in his life to warn one another, "He will kill you with his questions." After finishing preparatory university studies in 1954 at Government College in Ibadan, Soyinka moved to England and continued his education at the University of Leeds, where he served as the editor of the school's magazine. And what was the name of the magazine? The Eagle. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in English literature in 1958. In 1972, the university awarded him an honorary doctorate. In the late 1950s, Soyinka wrote his first important play, A Dance of the Forests, which satirized the Nigerian political elite. From 1958 to 1959, Soyinka was a dramaturgist at the Royal Court Theatre in London. In 1960, he was awarded a Rockefeller Fellowship and returned to Nigeria to study African drama. In 1960, he founded the theatre group. So he founded the theatre group in which year? In 1960. The 1960 Masks, and in 1964 the Orison Theatre Company, in which he produced his own plays and performed as an actor. He has periodically been a visiting professor at the universities of Cambridge, Sheffield and Yale. So he was also visiting professor in many universities. Soyinka is also a political activist, and during the civil war in Nigeria, he appealed in an article for a ceasefire. He was arrested for this in 1967 and held as a political prisoner for 22 months until 1969. So he was also imprisoned for his political activism. In 1960, 86. Upon awarding Soyinka with the Nobel Prize for Literature, the committee said the playwright, in a wide cultural perspective and with poetic overtones, fashions the drama of existence. Soyinka sometimes writes of modern West Africa in a satirical style, but his serious intent and his belief in the evils inherent in the exercise of power are usually present in his work. To date, Soyinka has published hundreds of works. In addition to drama and poetry, he has written two novels, The Interpreters, and it was published in 1965, and Season of Enemy, and it was published in 1973, as well as autobiographical works including The Man Died, Prison Notes, and it was published in 1972, a gripping account of his prison experience, and AK in 1981, a memoir about his childhood. Myth, Literature and the African World 1975. So it was published. Myth, Literature and the African World was published in 1975, is a collection of Soyinka's writings. As Soyinka has said, against my rational instincts, I believe that we have here a genuine case of a born-again Democrat. He said, ultimately, the real heroes of this exercise have been the Nigerian people, and that gingers me up. Now considered Nigeria's foremost man of later, Soyinka is still politically active and spent the 2005 election day in Africa's biggest democracy working the phones to monitor reports of voting irregularities, technical issues and violence, according to The Guardian. After the election on March 28, 2015, he said that Nigerians must show a Nelson Mandela-like ability to forgive President-elect Muhammadu Buhari's past as iron-fisted military ruler, according to Bloomberg.com. Now summary of the poem. I think you understood the introduction of the poet, and now summary of the poem, and you know what is the poem, what is the name of the poem? Telephone Conversation. This is the summary of the poem. Telephone Conversation is a 1963 poem by the Nigerian writer Wole Soyinka that satirized racism. The poem describes a phone call between a landlady and the speaker, who is black. Speaker is black, about renting an apartment, and that landlady and a person is talking about renting an apartment. The landlady is pleasant until she learns that the speaker is African, at which point she demands to know how light or dark the speaker's skin is. In response, the speaker cleverly mocks the landlady's ignorance and prejudice, demonstrating that characterizing people by their skin color diminishes their humanity. It seemed like a good price and the location was fine. The landlady promised that she didn't live in the building. The only thing left was to confess something important about myself. The narrator is saying that only thing was left to confess something important about himself. Ma'am, and he said, ma'am, I want the landlady. I don't want to waste a trip over there. Just so you know, I am black. There was silence on the phone. In that silence, I could hear the tension between the landlady's prejudice and her manners. When she finally spoke, she sounded like the kind of a person who would be wearing a thick smear of lipstick and have a long gold-coated cigarette holder in her mouth. Now I was stuck in a terrible position. How dark are you? She asked the question. How dark are you? She asked bluntly. It took me a second to realize that I hadn't misheard her. She repeated, are you light-skinned or very dark-skinned? It was like she was asking me something as simple as choosing between button A and button B on the phone booth to make a call or to return my coins. I could smell her rancid breath hiding beneath her polite speech. Though she was speaking politely, but she was asking such type of questions which were very, very harsh. I took stock of my surroundings, a red phone booth, a red mailbox, a red double-decker bus, its tires squelching through the hot asphalt. So this kind of thing actually happens. Feeling ashamed at my rude silence, I gave in and asked. Utterly confused and shocked for clarification, she was nice enough to sweep around the order of the words in the question. Are you dark-skinned? She asked, or very light. Finally, it made sense. I replied, are you asking if my skin is the color of regular chocolate or milk chocolate? So, do you want to know what is the color of my skin? Is it of the color of regular chocolate or milk chocolate? Her confirmation was detached and formal, devastating in how thoughtless and impersonal she sounded. I quickly changed my tactic and chose an answer. My skin color is West African sepia. And then, as an afterthought, I added, at least it is in my passport. Then there was silence again as she imagined all the possible colors I might be referring to. But then her true feelings took over and she spoke harshly into the phone. What is that? She asked, admitting, I don't know what that is. It is a brunette color, I told her. That's pretty dark, isn't it? She asked. Not entirely, I replied. My face is brunette, but you should see the rest of my body, ma'am. My palms and the soles of my feet are the color of bleached blonde hair. Unfortunately, ma'am, all the friction from sitting down has made my butt as black as a river. Wait, hang on for a moment, ma'am, I said, sensing that she was about to slam down the phone. Ma'am, I begged, don't you want to see for yourself? And now the theme of the poem. It was the summary of the poem, and now what is the theme of the poem? And poem is telephone conversation. So this is the theme of the poem. Telephone conversation is a poem that satirizes racism. The speaker, who is black, makes fun of a white landlady who won't rent to the speaker until she knows whether the speaker's skin is dark or light. In contrast to the landlady's simple, reductive ideas about race, the speaker suggests that race and identity are complicated and multifaceted. Judging a person based on their skin color, the poem argues, is thus ignorant, illogical, and dehumanizing. So, judging a person on the basis of skin, it is very dehumanizing. At first, the landlady seems ready to move forward with renting to the speaker, even swearing that she lived off premises. She can't detect the speaker's race through the phone, a fact that emphasizes that the speaker's identity is comprised of more than his or her race, and that skin color is irrelevant to the speaker's suitability as a tenant. But when the speaker then makes a self-confession about being African, the conversation abruptly shifts to a discussion of skin tone. Note that the speaker is being ironic in the use of confession, here a word typically associated with the revelation of something criminal, to undermine the racist notion that being African is a bad thing. So in this poem, it is presented that being African is a very bad thing. Clearly, the speaker understands how black people's housing prospects are unfairly limited by a racist society. Indeed, a response to this confession, the landlady asks whether the speaker's skin is light or dark. A question so absurd that the speaker briefly wonders if he or she has misheard. The landlady is playing into the ignorant idea that black people with lighter skin, and as such whose skin is closer in appearance to that of white people, are superior to those with darker skin. The key thing that matters to her then is how black the speaker looks. Instead of asking what the speaker does professionally, what the speaker's habits are, that is, instead of treating the speaker like an actual human being and potential tenant, the landlady reduces the speaker to a single attribute, skin color. Racism, the poem thus makes clear, is inherently reductive and dehumanizing. As such, the speaker refuses to answer the landlady's questions directly. instead offering a series of clever replies that reveal the landlady's question to be not just offensive but also utterly illogical. For instance, the speaker describes him or herself as West African sepia, a kind of reddish brown hue seen in old monochromatic photos. In the speaker's passport, a joke that goes right over the slow-witted landlady's head. Essentially, this is like saying, well, in a black and white photograph, my skin is grey. The speaker doesn't just criticize the landlady's blatant racism, but also critiques the way she thinks about race itself. In doing so, the speaker refuses to let the complexity of human identity be reduced by the ignorant choice that the landlady offers. For all the speaker's ingenuity, however, the poem does not end on a triumphant note. As the poem closes, the landlady is about to hang up on the speaker, suggesting that as a white person, she still holds the power in society to effectively silence the black speaker. So, this is the theme of this poem, and I think you understood it. And in my next video, I will explain this poem line to line. So, thanks for watching this video.